Just say that Jennifer is the speaker standing between you and a break, and I promise you at exactly 11 o'clock you will have a 30-minute break. But for now, Jennifer, you can come on stage. Jennifer has been testing engineering environments to accelerate learning and serendipity, so just what we've been talking about all morning, especially through a corporate headquarters campus and its surrounding neighborhood. And she says, and I'm very intrigued to hear more about this, that this adventure happened in the city where she least expected it to happen. So, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here again. Just 2 years ago, I was actually here on this stage presenting what back then was a very little-known phenomenon known as, I don't know if you can switch to my screen, known as coworking. Back then, I had the disclaimer that I would be showing very unconventional environments and things that didn't quite look like offices or felt like workspaces, and I will repeat this disclaimer for this presentation. Hopefully you will see the way I see that these types of projects, this project in particular, tells us something quite specific about the way we can think of the future. If you could shift to my screen. Cindy, you'll have to cut me some slack here on the time. Perfect. So in this presentation, I will talk about co-working, but in an entirely different way. In 2011, shortly after this, while I was discussing my own research in this field, in the arena of co-working, the body of work that I call the co-working effect, I had the opportunity to join a startup team of new types of people that were engaged in scaling this idea, and specifically to join a project that by all accounts is what I would consider hybrid in the world of corporate real estate headquarters, a hybrid between such a place, a corporate real estate project, and a downtown civic neighborhood. So this happened in the city as least expected, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this adventure. So this is the adventure in downtown Las Vegas. So despite the magnitude of the project that I will present, the reality is that this project, it's important to note, that its entire DNA, as I would say, its design DNA, is rooted in an understanding of startup culture. Not only was our team required to think about the Zappos corporate headquarters as a space where you would foster entrepreneurship and you would foster startup culture, but you actually look at the entire neighborhood, which is in this case still a deserted landscape of empty lots, as a startup space, which meant that as you built the physical presence of the neighborhood, you would be building very much based on co-working principles. So the talk today is about, I want to go a little bit deeper in this project with just pointing out right away that in no way in 15-20 minutes you could actually describe the complexity of a very fast project that is very much in the making right now, and by all accounts could be a 15-20 year project accelerated to about 5 years according to Tony. So the building that you see here on the side is the future Zappos corporate headquarters. In October 2013 it will open. It's a $40 million renovation of the former City Hall of downtown Las Vegas. 1,500 employees will move for the suburbs in Henderson, Nevada. And in Tony's own word and vision, Tony Hsieh, the CEO, I think his approach to this is very different. Unlike Nike, Google, Apple, corporate headquarters are very insular. They're great for employees that provide tremendous amounts of amenities. He felt that it would be interesting and potentially more innovative to turn this inside out and to invest in an ecosystem around the building, so around the headquarter campus in itself, to create the types of environments that in the long run would retain and attract more employees to the campus itself. So the design strategies to integrate co-working into the corporate headquarters buildings would deserve a presentation in its own right. We won't talk about them right now. This is showing here a couple of images of spaces for maximizing collisions and a notion of very high density, about between 75 to 80 square feet per person in this corporate headquarters. What I will talk about is, in fact, the ecosystem, which is known as the Downtown Project, downtownproject.com. This project takes place in the Fremont East District of downtown Las Vegas. And what the Downtown Project is a private investment fund of $350 million, roughly allocated this way, sponsored by Tony in and of itself. The ecosystem, as you see it right now, simply wishes to distribute this funding in a very organic and a very fast and startup way to create, in fact, a distributed portfolio of real estate assets, as well as investment in the small businesses, the tech companies that will create and support the creative culture of this arena. The last reported figures that I saw in March 2013 accounted for about 90 parcels acquisitions being made since the beginning of the project. When it started there was 2011 for about 50 acres of land for an expense of about 110 million to date. So we're looking at a fairly aggressive project from that perspective. And again, the ecosystem play right next to the corporate campus play. So my role in this, or my assignment from Tony, was to simultaneously work on both projects as a consultant. So on the corporate campus side, I engage with my other fellow consultants on the development team, the architects, obviously, the engineers, the entire consulting team, contractor and project management, to integrate co-working principles in the building itself. But on the fund side, the actual development side, my assignment was to accelerate co-working culture, which effectively meant to develop from scratch the tools, the systems, and the environments that would allow you to accelerate what co-working yields, namely accelerated learning and serendipity. Now, many of you have probably heard about this, and co-working are thinking about how do you do this in a corporate environment. My position is actually quite strong. I believe it's possible to scale these yields and to scale things like serendipity and learning. I know Greg mentioned this earlier in his talk, but beyond the designing of the environments themselves, which I won't focus on today, I think what's important for us to understand is that the structural shift that I talked about 2 years ago when I was talking about this disruption called co-working is well established now in the mainstream. We learn to interact with each other, to work with each other, to problem solve, to brainstorm in digital space today. And our productivity can be very much measured and augmented through digital tools, defining business productivity and work productivity. But what that means is that our expectations as inhabitants and users of the physical environment has changed as well, which means that the performance metrics, what means productivity of a real estate investment, as well as how you build these environments, has to change. So we had to shift mode in many ways. And what you see here is actually the logo designed by a team, an army of volunteers, very much shifting to a skunkworks arena and a skunkworks advanced R&D project. I very quickly started recruiting within the neighborhood, so within the context of the city, volunteers that would come and help me to begin to see if we could accelerate co-working in a place where no co-working spaces existed and no real demand for workspace existed. You saw the empty parking lots before. So managing this idea of acceleration meant that we would create an environment, a group, a cohort of people that effectively were passionate about shifting the perception of Las Vegas to what we all know Las Vegas to be through media, to what in fact it really is. And this decentralized network of volunteers that became my team, started with 6 people, eventually became over 500 people, and the 3 projects that I will show you are actually decentralized projects, which also had their own specific networks, became an army that we were able to mobilize using this engineering diagram. So this project for me was effectively a systems engineering project. The systems engineering had to, in this case, the objectives obviously were to accelerate the development, but I believe it's possible to simultaneously create a process to co-design what, let's call them 1, 2, 3 real estate assets in a distributed portfolio, where you can share resources and operations from a top-down perspective, and at the same time leverage digital tools, or at least the knowledge, the way in which we interact in digital space, to accelerate the community. And the measurements of productivity in this case, if you repeat this over and over again, are actually very compelling. So the work for me started with very simple principles: distributed knowledge, openness, co-creation, a distributed network and a decentralized network, where if I could create a system, if we could create a system of individuals, of workers, that would actually be able to react to change in a very fast way, here maximizing the capacity for adaptation, you inherently create a very resilient system. I called in reinforcements from some of my friends in the co-working network in North America that are very successful at building very thriving communities. And sharing that knowledge for me had to be coupled with sharing knowledge of how you build buildings, how you build physical environments, and engage directly the participants that would be prospective tenants, that would be prospective workers. Because when you learn how to build with one another and you understand each other, you inevitably create a sense of empathy, which creates to organize the social relationships inside a workspace that are not possible to do if it's only a top-down and no participation from the end user. So Studio Tilt from my friends from London came, and we continued to develop these co-design sessions for the spaces. All the while in this project, which became a civic project, distributing co-learning, meaning constantly back and forth, tracking, measuring, and sharing the data of the way in which all of this progress was feeding in a community and in environments and sessions that looked very much like this. Data transfer, lectures, knowledge sharing among the participants of which were my prospective tenants, my users, the community, that now had a very much a blurry line between civic participants and corporate employees. And that line seemed to no longer be a problem because there were other projects that were emerging and there were other things that were in the case. So the point that I think it's important to seize, I think Greg mentioned earlier about invisibility, this is not just about the physical work environment, obviously the physical environments itself, because what I was constantly monitoring from an analytics perspective. I was tracking the activity on 29 different channels, which is effectively saying 29 different work groups that were emerging around ideas and passion. And what you see is that when I began the measuring tracking, this is a 6-month track of the activities, the very top line, the steady line that you see, the flat line, is actually an existing community, Vegas tech community, which was the largest one by sheer number of people. It was about 350 people. This is the growth and acceleration of every single other community during the time that this project was at play. And you see the sharp increase in the areas that have to do with learning. Very quickly in this process, I introduced the notion of building together in the real world. And 10 proof of concept projects emerged, which effectively are passion projects. What are you passionate about, and what would you like to see in this neighborhood? What would you like to see built? Which is effectively to say, share your voice as to what this portfolio of distributed real estate assets should deliver to you as a performance. The projects that you will see are unconventional. They are not workspace projects. But I think what's important to understand is the connection between these projects and a new way, an emergent way of working. Just a few more points of data. I can only show a few. But while peaks, the minute the proof of concept, the building project started, the peaks would happen right before the activity of building would start. And then online peaks per engaged user would actually decrease. The actual engagement of the users in the physical environment would be stabilized. What that means is that people, once they met in the physical world, would actually find a point of continuum and a point of emergency. People would develop an emotional connection to the physical environment, which allowed them to actually increase occupancy rates. They wanted to be together, and they wanted to be together in the real world, which was very new, not expected, because the activity in the physical and the digital work environment didn't really reflect that, but it was actually quite remarkable. So this is the first project I will show, the first unconventional project. This group tackled health and wellness. If you can play the volume. I will speak a little bit. This is the Sunday Reset project while the volume starts. Maybe I'll pause it.